Parity and the polyodontity. You don't have to know that unless you plan on working in the freshwater fishes or something like that. It's a good idea to know. But the sturgeons, the Accipenserity, they have 5 rows of bony scutes. So you can see one row right here, there's another row down here, there's one on top, and then these 2 are massed over on the other side. So you still got some degree of protection, but at the same time you have a reduction in weight. And then they have a very inferior mouth. The mouth is set way back, and then they have 4 barbels that are in front of or anterior to the mouth. And if you really want to be technical, you think of this as 2 pairs, right? 1 pair on each side. And then the spoonbills, they have the large paddle or spoon-like snout, and that snout, you can't see it here, but there are ampullary receptors all over it. What do those ampullary receptors do? Because I forgot.
Sense electricity.
Strong or weak?
Strong.
Weak.
Weak.
Yeah, so they pick up weak electrical fields, right? But that's what they're doing. They are picking up. So the spoonbills will move slowly, relatively close to the bottom, and they can use that large surface area to pick up electrical fields for their prey. All right, the Neoterygii, or as you might prefer, the Neopterygii.
No, I like Neoterygii
I
better.
do too. I really, really do. I should go give Bob humbug talk and say how you're doing it wrong. Just go, yeah! Hey, you get off my lawn. Yell at the clouds. So the Neoterygii contains 2 orders and a division, and these are orders that you need to know. They are on your list. So the Ameiformes and Teleostii, the division Teleostii, again, that is a sister group relationship, and then the Lepisosteoformes are basal to that particular group. But those 2 orders and the Teleostii make the subclass Neoterygii. So Lepisosteoformes are the guards. Elongated body, classic sort of lie-in-wait ambush predator. The dorsal and anal fins set well back by the caudal fins, so you just get that large surface area for that really quick, rapid propulsion. Terminal mouth, so when you start out at them, got a better chance of catching them. So all of the gar have this type of shape, and if you've ever seen or held a gar, you know they got that really heavy, bony ganoid scales that forms that nice armor covering. It's really hard to cut it with the knife. It's just easier to use an axe or a machete. The Ameiformes, the bowfin. So again, sort of a well-known shape, pretty common in quiet, muddy waters around here. I think most of you by now have noticed the gular plate. So this is between the chin. This is your gular region, right? And so in between the dentary bones of the lower jaw, you've got that big, large, heavy plate. Very obvious there, and that's the gular plate. All right, we get to this point? All right, last one. Again, here we are. Division Teleostii still has over 27,000 species of fish, right? What did we say at the beginning of the semester? Roughly 30,000. So there's still, most of our diversity is within this particular group. So marine biology, the joke is if you don't know the answer, just say wave action. Here, if you don't know the answer, just say Teleostii. Of course, if I ask you how do they fill their swim bladder and you write Teleostii, you're probably going to be wrong. Right? Again, just a general sense of diversity in there. These numbers aren't entirely accurate, but this is where most of the diversity lies. So there are a lot. There are many orders within this particular division. There is no way we're going to capture them all or cover them all, right? We'd go way beyond the length of a semester, and 2 lectures of classification is good enough. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of some of the larger groups and so on. So the Cypriniformes is the largest order of freshwater fishes in the world, right? And that also includes in North America. So So the group as a whole, the Cypriniformes as a whole, are collectively known as the carps. They are everywhere, but their greatest diversity is in Southeast Asia. There's a couple thousand species over in that area. They have really high diversity in South America. Makes our number look small, but in terms of North American fishes, the Cypriniformes is our largest group of freshwater fishes. So here's the largest one. So approaching 2.5 meters, so there's a typical human for scale. Pretty damn big fish. This right here, the smallest vertebrate, not just the smallest fish, but the smallest vertebrate. As an adult, its total length is less than the width of this pencil. Right? That's a full-grown adult. I love show and tell like that, because that is one really small fish. You see it on the thing, it's like, oh, that's not that small. It's like, yeah, it is. So one thing with these, most of them do not have teeth on their jaws, or if they do have teeth on their jaws, they're really weak. They're really small and weak and so on. Like you might feel their jaw and feel like really weak sandpaper, but couldn't even begin to break skin or anything like that. So instead, they have those pharyngeal teeth, those throat teeth, right? And those are often really big and heavy duty. Even for a little minnow, a little shiner, relatively speaking, they have relatively sturdy pharyngeal teeth. So that's what they use for breaking up their prey and so on. At the time I put this together, there were 63 species in Missouri, but there's probably a few more because some of this has been broken up. But we have the two families. This is our minnows and shiners, and then the catastomids are suckers. So just a couple of representatives. So spotfin shiner, I had to look it up because I only know it's Cyprinellus Philoptera. Actually, I had to go through and look up. This was the only one I remembered off the top of my head for continents. So, but spotfin shiner, this genus Cyprinellus, really cool group of shiners, and minnows, really nice. These are common Atheronoides, the emerald shiners, real common out in the Mississippi River. They tend to be larger bodies of water than smaller ones. Northern hogsucker, great name, so but hypentelium. And then this is quillback, one of the suckers. So these two are suckers. They get their name because they have typically inferior subterminal to inferior mouths, fairly large lips, and they don't suck on to things, right? But they just get called suckers because of the shape of their mouth and so on. Catfishes, again, really big diversity. Not so much here in North America. We have, but you get over into Asia and particularly into South America, you have really high diversity catfishes. Again, big old river monsters and so on. Some of the smaller ones is really, really pretty. Glass catfish and so on. So a lot of diversity as a whole. These are one of the few groups that has an adipose fin, right? So remember, we talked about the adipose fin, but there's relatively few groups that have adipose fins. Catfishes, the salmon and trout, the carasses, that includes like piranha and so on. There's relatively few, but right there, adipose fin, right there, adipose fin. Can't really see it on these guys. I think it's kind of right there. They have 1 to 4 pairs of barbels around the mouth, so above the mouth as well as below the mouth. And then basically these are naked fishes, so the vast majority of them have lost their scales, but there's a few, probably called the armored catfishes, where they have those scales really expanded out into more of a heavy bony type of armor. And then all of that is, there's a lot of different families, but we only have the one species, or the one family in Missouri, with just 16 or so species. So some of you are familiar with the bullheads, right? So we've got the black bullhead, brown bullhead are here, or actually brown's here, but not common. Yellow bullhead's the other common one. Most of our diversity of catfishes is in the genus Noturus, the mad toms. Really cool group of fishes. They're not very big. You don't get like that, but you find them in streams under rocks and things like that. Channel cats, forked tail versus almost circle tail. And then flathead catfish, pilot necks, the coolest catfish. Others maybe the mad dogs. All right, so that gets us down to Perciformes. Largest order of fishes, largest order of vertebrates. It is probably not a monophyletic group. This is an area where there's still a lot of taxonomic shuffling, right? Things get moved around all the time. It's like, based on this data set, these belong within Perciformes, these don't belong within it. No study comes along and says, oh yes, these do belong. It's these that gotta get kicked out. There's a lot of work. When you got so much diversity, it gets really hard to take over 10,000 species and get pretty confident whether Perciformes, as currently recognized, is a monophyletic group or not, okay? But for our purposes, we're gonna go with it as just the largest order of reasonably close related groups. Most of them are marine, but definitely we've got freshwater representation. So all of them have spiny fins. So there can be a spiny first dorsal and soft rays in the second dorsal. Sometimes the two dorsal fins are separated. Sometimes the dorsal fins are continuous, right? So like again, look at a largemouth bass. Basically you have a first and soft, second dorsal, spiny and soft, but they look like one long dorsal fin and function like that. The vast majority of these have thoracic to jugular, right? So again, you've got the thoracic, so there's the pectoral fin, there's the pelvic fin, and for jugular, the pelvic fin comes in advance, goes up into the throat region. Now I gotta clarify something on this. One of the things, so this says premaxilla forms the entire upper jaw, and that's not quite right, okay? Because that would give you the impression that this entire bone through here is a premaxilla, and that's not the case. Let me try my artwork again. So in a lot of the fishes, here is our maxilla. And then extending around from the midline towards the side, you basically will have sort of the premaxilla that goes underneath a little bit. Right, so you got the first little bit is the premaxilla, and then you see the rest of it being the maxilla. What has happened in these is that the premaxilla has extended out like that, so it's now so much longer structure. So what you would see here is the lip, the lower part that bears all the teeth is the premaxilla, right? So essentially the chewing part, you might want to say, the opening itself, is premaxilla or dentary, but still much of the structure that provides the support is the maxilla. But it's just that the premaxilla has expanded in size and bears all of the teeth, okay? And none of these guys have adipose fins. This is the 8 largest families within the Perciformes. So gobies, over 2,000 species, so the Gobiidae. The Cichlidae is the next largest group, and depending on who you talk to and so on, the cichlids might actually be larger than the gobies, right? So they're at least reasonably close to each other. For a long time, this has been accepted as the most diverse group, but when you start looking over in the Rift Valley lakes in Africa, there's a huge amount of diversity. And some people have suggested there's more than 500 species in a single lake, right? So there's a lot of diversity here regardless. This is, out of all the 8 families shown here, this is the only one that's primarily freshwater. All the others are marine. Serranidae is the sea basses. That also includes groupers and that type of thing. The wrasses, blennies, it's kind of there in the name. Damselfishes are fun. They're a great little group. So a lot of diversity, particularly over in the Indo-Pacific. Same for the cardinal fishes. And then Cyanidae are drums, which includes our freshwater drums, so that we have here in Missouri, as well as a lot of other freshwater rivers. So representative families, you got Maronidae, the Centrarchid, so that's your largemouth basses, smallmouth basses, brims, and so on. Perches, Percidae.
What did that fish do to be named Moron?
The Moroni, it's Moroni. I don't know the derivation of Moroni. They used to actually be included down here, but they got moved out, so it's Moroni really. So, but I don't know what the derivation of Moroni was. I don't know off the top of my head. So the perches, the Percidae, we have the yellow perch. But all the others in the group are darters, like that's what's pictured up there. So the darters, it's more than three genera now, it used to be just three. A lot of diversity, there's, forgot how many, 100 and some odd species, 150 or so in North America. The greatest diversity is here in the southeast, primarily in Kentucky and Tennessee. And then, little Bantam sunfishes, Elastomatidae. Cute little guys, they're only like that big. So that's all I got to say except for one thing. So this is Bill Flieger, Fishes of Missouri. And one thing that I've always liked about this, that was no help. So one of the things he does is he will generally go through and he will give the derivation of the scientific names. And for this one, for Moroni, a name of unknown derivation. So no answer to that. That's why I went to get this. Is like, oh, well, I know where I could look that up. But apparently, if Flieger doesn't know, nobody knows. Now, we would have to go back to the original description for when it was assigned. And because when you describe a species and you give it the formal scientific name, you have to give the etymology and why you're using it, right? So Moroni, because it represents that Sax Atlas is actually 6 lines, because that's sort of, there's more than 6 lines, but that's what that's referring to and so on. So you will typically go through, so zonatum, it's in zones, or it says referring to the banding and that type of thing.
When they give something a scientific name, like sometimes people